I'm Kyle Swan. I direct our Center for Practical and Professional Ethics. This is our first afternoon session. You're all invited back for the final session of our symposium at 2 p.m. Our speaker in this session is Keith Staten, who is CEO and practicing attorney at the law office of Keith J. Staten and Associates. He received his JD from the University of Pacific, McGeorge School of Law. His practice specializes in handling complex criminal litigation, DUI litigation, and administrative licensing issues. And he also devotes a considerable amount of time to community service clinics, public speaking, and mentoring. Sacramento County Indigent Defense Panel named him Attorney of the Year in 2012. In 2014, The Hub magazine recognized him as a leader in the community. The Wiley Manual Bar Association named him Attorney of the Year in 2014. Here's how the session will go. Mr. Staten will speak for about 40 minutes. Then we'll have a little interaction between our main speaker and our co-panelists. We have Chris Serpinant of the University of New Orleans and Lotus Fung, who's a JD student at UC Davis. So please join me in welcoming Keith Staten.
Well, first of all, it is a pleasure to be here, especially knowing that a lot of you are class members of Julie Muma, who is a friend of mine. We go way back, old battles. All right, here we go. Person who helped save my life was Malcolm X. Malcolm X, before he spoke, said, "I intend to educate, enlighten, and inspire." So, that's always been my goal, is to educate, enlighten, and inspire. I usually hold back, no punches or anything like that. We're all adults here. But what I'm going to talk about is a historical review and factual discussion of your rights and the criminal justice system. I've been a lawyer for over 25 years now. I do major criminal cases here in Sacramento. You can come watch me. You can come see what I do at any particular time. I'm wide open to such things, especially individuals who care about the criminal justice system. So, because I got 40 minutes, I got to move. So here we go. First thing, this slide represents point 10. Point 10 says you have the right to know your rights. Now, this is from the Black Panther Party's 10-point system. The Black Panther Party, which you all will learn about and know about, was an organization that was formed in order to help black individuals in their communities. I pointed to this point because this is my whole thing. You do have the right to know your rights, and until you know them and exercise them, you will lose them. And that's what we're going to talk about, is why. All right. First thing, we're going to talk about the legacy of America. Second, what must change? Third, injustices in the second civil rights movement. Institutionalized racism today. And your rights under the Constitution. Now that'll be the final thing, which is the educational component of it all, is because what I want to teach you is how to stay alive when you deal with police officers, how to exercise your rights under the Constitution in order to have a favorable outcome when it comes with dealing with police. Because needless to say, that's become an issue nowadays. All right, legacy of America. What is America? Well, we know this country was built on the genocide of one race and the enslavement of another. As soon as and when we continue to deny such a thing, we don't understand our history. I'll give you a perfect example. When I'm a child, you might tell me that Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and all these guys were for my freedom, right? All men are created equal. We are all created this way, equal. And freedom for all and justice for all. But that was not true. At the same time they signed these documents, at the same time they had this philosophy, they also were holding their glasses up and winking at each other, saying, not really, not for everybody. And that's the way it was. Whether we like it or not, that's just the way it is. And we have to understand the legacy of America to move on. So, what do we end up with? Slavery and Jim Crow laws. And really, it equals terrorism, if you really think about it. How? Well, I had to be separated. I didn't go to school with white people until I was about 14 years old. I'm that old. I remember these things going on, and I didn't understand it completely, but that's just the way things were. So when we would travel across country in our car, we would have to have food that was made by my mom in advance. We would pee in cups and things like that because you couldn't go to any restaurant you wanted to. You couldn't enjoy Sizzler or anything like that. I remember those days. This is a sign that's in my house. I bought it at a thrift store. It was just there. And I thought, wow, maybe I should own this, so that I'll never forget how things were. Tools of enforcement. How did you get people to behave that way? Well, we obviously know that there was a level of violence that went on in order to keep people enslaved, as well as servitude for those who were not slaves. But the law helped. How? Because we had Jim Crow laws. You couldn't be where white people were. In fact, you're going to see in this new movie coming out called Loving about how you could not marry someone in the white race. You weren't supposed to be together. Now, here's the thing. I remember that time. And a lot of us may remember that time, some of us, but a lot of you don't really know that time. So I encourage you to watch the movie and to think about the concept of, if I want to be with someone with another race, that would be completely wrong. And we may suffer harm and or death as a result. So the law was a major way of enforcing Jim Crow laws. For example, some people may say, well, I wasn't that way. I don't believe that way. But we are a nation of laws, and you will follow the law. And they didn't change the law. You had to sneak around. You had to go around the law like we would today if we found a law we didn't want to follow. But the law helped us to keep people enslaved. Politics was in there too, of course. One other way, education. I like to look at this. Historical black colleges were built in probably the 1850s, 60s, somewhere around in there. At a time when, if you were to teach me something, I could die. If I were reading a book on the plantation or at any point, I can die. So education was a major tool to keep from individuals, because the more and more you know, the more and more I can keep you ignorant and I can keep you down. And we had this little thing called separate but equal, where we said, well, you know, we're going to be separate, but it will be equal. And we've learned through Brown versus Board, which I'll talk about in a minute, that when that was abolished, it took years for that to be enforced, because the law never changes another person's mind. It's what's in your heart. Land, wealth. Land and wealth is everything in this country. If you own the land, you own something. When you don't, you don't. There was this whole thing of 40 acres and a mule, and if you'll see Spike Lee's company named 40 Acres and a Mule, a lot of people don't know what that really meant, but that was some sort of promise that was to the slaves that we'll give you some land and we'll give you a mule to tend to that land. And then that will make you equal. However, that agreement never panned out. So, what was the theory? Divide and conquer. Now, I'm going to get very controversial here, because it was this way. We want white tenants in our white community. There was a thing called white flight. There's a thing called gentrification that we hear of now. Now, what's the tie-in? The tie-in is that there are communities that were white that wanted to stay white, and they had a right to stay white. Why? Because the law said that. So why wouldn't you want to stay white? And today what we hear is this big word, which means that, well, in lower communities, the taxes are low, the housing is really cheap, so we can go in, we can redevelop, and then whites will want to come back in because now it's a nice place to live. I'll give you an example. I went to McGeorge School of Law right here in Sacramento. When I went to McGeorge did not own all of the property that you see around McGeorge. And McGeorge has expanded now into a very large campus. And then I started wondering, well, how is that so? And then I started looking at Georgetown, Columbia, and a lot of other law schools, even Stanford. And I realized, wow, they're all right next to the hood. I wonder why. Why did they start there? Was it because things were so cheap, so easy? Yes, that's why. Education. Brown versus Board of Education. A beautiful legal battle, and you should learn about it. It took about 9-10 years to get to the Supreme Court, where it was a 9-0 decision that said that school segregation would be banned. You see, those in the civil rights movement, and specifically NAACP's Legal Defense Fund, headed by Thurgood Marshall, they decided that we're going to attack education in order to integrate. That will be the place where nobody can say we are not equal and we shouldn't provide equal education. It just happened to be the first battleground. And what's beautiful, I tell you, there are blessings. Last weekend, a week and a half ago, I was in Arkansas. And I saw Central High School, which in 1955, the Little Rock nine kids decided to go to that school. Now, when you watch the videos and things, I want you to know it was the military and National Guard that had to escort these kids to school. They had to stay at the school and be a guard for these children. And they were ridiculed. It's one of the most terrible things, and you would not want to go through it. But these kids were picked out and selected for their strength because they knew that they can do it. Just like an individual like Jackie Robinson, and when you hear his story, he was picked out, and when it was determined he would not fight back. He's not going to say anything to any abuse that comes to him, and that was important. And I watched the school, which sits there today, and it's a majestic school. It is as beautiful today as it would have been in '55. It's just that it stands as history now, and history only, because now we know we can integrate schools. And the only reason you do that is because of people like the Little Rock Nine. Education has always been the vehicle to enlightenment and progress. Now, I don't just say that. That's not my thought. Someone by the name of Nelson Mandela said that. He said it's the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. Now, we kind of know who Nelson Mandela is, an individual who suffered for years in prison. But in this country, education is king. It's power. Look at where you're at now. Look at the things people are trying to teach you. And what I believe is you got to know your history, because you got to know where you're from in order to know where you're going. Some people, like me, would understand the trend that brought an individual like Trump into the White House. Oh, I understand what happened. I know what happened. But yet, for some of us, we will struggle with that. But all it means is now you must educate yourself as to how to change this system, or change what you may seem to think is wrong or different. Education has always been the powerful tool. That's why it was denied for so long. And I always throw this out there. Remember I said historical black colleges in the 1850s, 60s, things like that, right? And still here today. Think about this. It was a time where white people could burn down churches, houses. They can pull you out your house, lynch you for no reason. There's no justice. How did these schools exist then and exist now? How? How did they avoid the torches? Maybe it's the strength of the people who run them. But one thing is for sure, education is key, and it's powerful. So, what do we got to change in this world, right? What do we got to do? This slide depicts the skin color and how we punish in our criminal justice system. A lot of people believe the lighter you are, the less sentence you'll receive. And definitely, the more money you have, the better your result may be in the criminal justice system. So how do we change such things? What must change, really? Because we can't go back and now just change laws, can we? But we know this. The police. Do we change the police? No, we're not going to change the police. The police are going to do what they have to do. They are policing because our system requires them to police. It's how they police that probably should be looked at. What else can we change? Oh, the law. How about if we change the laws, right? Hey, cops, stop shooting people who are unarmed. Why isn't that a law? You know, it is in a way, isn't it? Because if you walked out here and you just shot somebody, you're going to be looking for me to defend you for murder. But if you walked out here and someone tried to shoot you and you shot back, well, maybe you're not guilty of anything at all, and we have laws on the books for that. And one thing we got to ponder is, when a man or woman is unarmed, are they really a danger to your health? Are they a danger when you, as an officer, have a weapon, and probably more of you than the other person? So what justifies you to kill a person? Why couldn't you shoot them in the leg? Why couldn't you taser them? I mean, we remember Oscar Grant. He was actually cuffed, sitting on a platform, a BART, and still got shot. How do we reconcile this stuff? Because the law's not going to change it for us. It's us. It's us. It's all down to us, our behavior. We've got to change our narrative. You see, I like to think that I'm a dreamer in some ways, because I believe that action actually does change things. That we take action and things will change. Maya Angelou said this: if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. And that's how I feel. Oh, I don't like black men get killed. You think I revel at that? You think I enjoy that? I don't like when police kill anyone. I don't like when people kill anyone. But there are some things I'm not going to change, so I've got to change me in how I approach law enforcement, how I deal with law enforcement. And that's pretty much where we're going to go. Here's something, and I hope you can read it. We live in a world where trained cops are allowed to panic and act on impulse, but untrained civilians are expected to stay calm and follow directions while a gun is in their face. And that's kind of strange, right? But it reflects the power we have given our law enforcement over us. And it doesn't matter who's on the other end of the gun. It doesn't matter. But you're expected to change. You're expected to be calm and do everything an officer tells you to do. When the officer, who may panic and shoot and claim, well, he's a big black guy, he seems scary to me, gives you the right to just shoot him. And then ask questions later about whether I had a weapon or not. We're living in crazy times nowadays. But the beautiful part is, what's your role, right? First of all, thank you for being here. You are present here today. You get to hear me, you get to hear other speakers. We are talking about this matter. Educate yourself and teach others. Act as you would want others to act. You are what you project. You really are. Take time to exercise, exercise, exercise. Exercise is a key word for me, because when I start talking about your rights under the Constitution, you're going to understand those rights will just lie there until you do something with them. It's like a lazy person sitting on the couch. If you don't exercise, you're never going to lose weight. You're never going to get in shape. You can give me rights, but if I don't exercise them, I can lose them. You will lose what has been gained if you don't exercise your rights. Now, I'm a stickler on this stuff because of what I'm about to go into next. Injustices and the second civil rights movement. Because I got to wonder, am I next? You know, what happens when I'm driving down the street and it's late at night, 2 in the morning, I'm not doing anything. I'm not dressed like this, and even if I was, so what? And what if I get into an encounter with an officer? Am I going to argue with the officer and explain, hey, I'm a lawyer, dude. What are you talking about? What am I supposed to do? How do I behave that's going to keep me alive? First of all, let's talk about Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison brought up this point. In this country, everybody called American usually means white, and everyone else has to hyphenate. African American, Hispanic American, Italian American, Irish American even. So what is it to be an American? Well, if you're a citizen of this society, you are entitled to all the rights and privileges of this society. You should never be marginalized as being something else. But we have a tendency to categorize and put people in different places. Then and now. Well, let's see. Back in '65, you would see a person saying, hey, give us American rights, give us some rights. And then the response would be, hey, go home, Negro. Get out of here. What are you doing? Go back to Africa. You're never going to get your rights. And now today, when people holler Black Lives Matter, we hear someone respond with all lives matter. Now we're going to talk about that a little bit because I have a little criticism of that. And that's, is this a true response to Black Lives Matter? Why would individuals say such a thing? Now, because of time, I'm going to skip that slide and go to these things. No one started saying all lives matter before people started saying Black Lives Matter. What's your point here, Keith? My point is, if all lives truly mattered, then I would never have to say Black Lives Matter, would I? If all lives truly mattered. So understand, saying Black Lives Matter is merely a response to what is felt to be injustices. It's not a violent response, it's a protest, which under the First Amendment we're going to talk about, you got every right to do. So it's just a response. And it's very similar to, what if someone said, breast cancer matters. And then you say, well, all cancer matters. Really? I'm making a point about breast cancer. I understand all cancer may matter, but we're talking about breast cancer. So what you're doing is you're deflecting. You're moving away from the issue. We have a tendency to do that here, is to deflect issues that are really hardcore because we don't want to hear the truth. We can't handle the truth sometimes, which is why when we look into our history, a lot of people say, well, that was then, this is now. But I often say, but yet you may be a descendant of individuals. You are a descendant of individuals. You lived in this country 50, 60 years ago too. You just didn't know it. Same people who are offended by Black Lives Matters are not offended by Blue Lives Matters. And what does that really mean? Cops, we should care about you. Let it be known. And if there's a cop in the room, I'm going to tell you, hey, I love you. I'm glad you're out there. You know why? Because one day I may have to call you. And I would like to be treated with the respect that anyone would be treated with. So yes, your life matters. I'm sick at the fact that cops get shot because I don't believe that that is a true response. But it is, like someone mentioned in another speech, it's a derivative crime. It's because of frustration in the community that people act out. And we've seen that in the civil rights movement. So today, maybe this is another civil rights movement. All Lives Matter just refocuses the issue away from the systematic racism and Black lives. That's all. We're not saying only Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter too. TOO. In addition. So, what is this racism thing, right? Well, first of all, we know my ancestors came here, they lived in chains. Now, anybody want to argue that? Thank you, but you're wrong. That's what happened. So let's get over it. What bothers me most is, today we see through mass incarceration almost the same thing occurring. Now I got to stop here and I got to tell you something. the 13th Amendment of the Constitution is a very, very important amendment. We're taught, hey, it ended slavery. But did it really? Because when you go Google it and look at the 13th Amendment, and when you watch the movie called 13th, you're going to learn that slavery shall be abolished except for those convicted, duly convicted of a crime. Now, nobody probably knew. Did you even know that? You see that, hey, if you're convicted of a crime, we can treat you like a slave. Free labor. We can do what we want to with you. And here's the funny part. They didn't say convicted of a crime currently or in the past, which is why felony convictions follow you the rest of your life, why you may be denied benefits because of your felony conviction, why it's okay to do so. And I'm going to argue that that 13th Amendment has opened up the floodgates for mass incarceration, for the drug wars, for laws that tend to severely punish individuals. Now, starts in preschool. Starts very early. Let's go through a few stories. Yale's Child Study Center said black children are 3.6 times more likely to receive a suspension than their white classmates. I'm going to run through some stats and stuff. Implicit bias is like the wind. You can't see it, but you sure can see its effects. This young boy received numerous suspensions while his white classmates received none for worse behavior. Now, this is just one little picking example, but it goes to show how even as a child, you can be treated differently, and it has a huge effect. What's a bigger effect is this war on drugs. Started out with Nixon. Nixon's chief domestic advisor revealed today, in the current time, that the war on drugs was created to target black people. In fact, he said by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and black people with heroin, then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt the communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, vilify them night after night on the evening news. Now, I got to stop right here for just a moment. Because when I look at this and I go, oh my God, you mean it was a real policy? You mean they really intended on bringing me down? And then I go back in history and I go, what about the Black Panthers? Ooh, they were the biggest terrorist unit that J. Edgar Hoover could find. But yet they fed children. They protected their community. We have to vilify people. We have to bring you down in order to make a point. Now, something else that bothered me, because this war on drugs is terrible, but I'm going to just tell you something. A friend sent me an email today, and I don't know if this is a virus thing or not, but I want you to just take this in. He said that, and this letter was from a record executive back in the early 80s. And this record executive was talking about a meeting among all these record executives by these secret individuals with guns. And they were saying that, you know what's new? Rap music is out. Hip hop is out. And you know what? They're talking about things like having fun and girls and all this kind of stuff. But as soon as gangster rap came out, the deal was play this gangster rap. Push it on the radios. Get it out there. You know why? Because it's telling people to kill each other. More importantly, young black men. Gangs arose in the late 80s. As they arose, the laws changed to incarcerate. Militarization of police departments became huge because they had to now fight this problem that's out there. And the more and more we get this music out, the more and more we rile people up. We can see it in the movies. When you look at movies that talked about gang violence and things like that. And I'm just wondering, could this have been true? Could radio stations and our airways and our media actually proliferate violence so that we can incarcerate? I believe it to be true. And it's true because of the mass incarceration that we have seen and the laws that have changed. What we've allowed to happen is something called direct file. And thank God Proposition 57 just recently passed, because now what direct file meant is that DA offices can now charge children with major crimes without a juvenile court deciding they should be treated as children. We all know the brain doesn't develop fully until you're about 23 years old. Now that was a problem, because now we have 16, 17-year-olds being tried as adults for robbery, shootings, and things like that. Now, we also know there's a problem with police-involved shootings, right? All right, let's go down that road. Washington Post. They created a project to track every fatal police-involved shooting after the death of Mike Brown, because that seemed to be, the big jump-off point, right? That's when everybody was like, wow, Ferguson, wow, this is going on? A lot of people didn't believe things were going on. And although black men make up 6% of the U.S. population, they account for 40% of the unarmed men being killed by police. Amazing. Let's talk about police-caused injuries. Harvard study. They looked at hospital emergency room data resulting from legal intervention, because that would mean that the cops got involved. The serious injuries by law enforcement increased 50% in a 13-year period. Black people were injured and sought medical treatment at a rate of 4.9 times higher than white. Let's talk about a New York City police officer, Omar Edwards, just to depict and get a different light of this police shooting thing. He's a cop, off duty. He's chasing a robbery suspect with his gun drawn in New York. Now, I will tell you, he doesn't have his uniform on because he's off duty. He was about to make the arrest when a white officer saw him, killed him because he thought he was the criminal. He was carrying his badge, though. So what do? Do we say, oh, oops, sorry, mistake, won't happen again? College campuses, hello, here we are. You know what they do in college campuses? Is that funny? Yeah, it must be funny. Somebody posted it, right? Who are they mocking? What are they trying to say? What are they communicating to us? And these are like-minded people like you. What are they doing, right? Hey, lock the black bitch out. Great. And this is today. I'm not showing pictures of the 60s and 70s, the 50s. So what do? Well, let's talk about this Ferguson thing and traffic stops, because now we're going to start understanding why things occur. For years, the black residents have been disproportionately targeted by the police officer for traffic stops. Now, let me just break the mystery right now. The more and more I pull people over for traffic violations, guess what they got to do? Pay a fine, right? At least a fine. Now, maybe I can catch some drugs, guns, things like that, and I get a little bit more. I get some incarceration going on. But at least you're going to pay a fine, because I need that fine as a city and a county in order to operate. So the more and more I pull over, the more and more I can ticket, the more and more will not fight it, and they'll just pay a fine. 85% of them were African American. 67% of the residents are black. 12.1% of black drivers were searched. We're going to talk about how you get to search somebody. But 6.1% of white drivers were searched. 67.5% of black drivers believed the reason for the stop was legitimate. 83% of the white drivers believed the traffic stop was legitimate. You know what incarceration does? It increases money. It is money. One of the things about this letter that I was telling you about was that the people behind it had bought and invested in private jails. Back in the 80s, private jails. And there was an incentive to fill those jails. So the deal is made with the government, we're going to fill those jails if you just build them. Prison guard union's the biggest union in California, one of the most powerful. How does that happen? Between 1980 and 2011, the number of incarcerated people grew from 500 to 2.2 million. U.S. has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's incarcerated population. 1 out of every 15 black male adults incarcerated. 1 out of every 106 white. Violent crimes down, but there are 11 times as many people incarcerated for drug convictions than in 1980. Cheap labor. How many people see the movie Shawshank Redemption? Yeah, you saw how prison labor is used in order to produce products. Products do what? Fuel capitalism, doesn't it? If I don't build products, I don't have capitalism. I can't survive. So, if I can get cheap labor like prisoners, like the 13th Amendment allows me to do, because when you are convicted, we can treat you like a slave and pay you 10 cents an hour, I get more product. If I get more product at 10 cents an hour, how different is that from using baby slaves overseas? How different is it? You're still using the labor of an individual in order to make a huge profit. Filling up jails, don't be fooled. It is a profit organization. Occupancy agreements is what they call them. States will sign contracts with private prisons to guarantee they will fill 90 to 100% of their beds. I'm going to tell you something. 3-4 years ago, federal judge Mr. Henderson said, California, you're incarcerating too many people. Your jails are too full. In a place like this, they would have bunk beds in prison. Fill this room with bunk beds, and everyone's living just like this in this space. Imagine if you had to live with all these people in this space, and you're in prison. What do you think goes on there? They're having mahjong games and playing chess and everything all the time, and everybody's doing little crossword puzzles and stuff? No. Very, very violent environment. It is not a friendly environment. And when you stuff that many people into one place, you got problems. Well, we started easing up on laws, Prop 47, 36. We started saying what was a felony should be a misdemeanor. We started changing laws in order to allow people out. But the big argument is, well, wait a minute, we can't do that because we're not filling up the prisons anymore. So you got to understand there is a huge amount of individuals and power out there that says in order to fuel capitalism, we really need these individuals that we can call slaves because they will help make our products. They will do things for us. United Nations. I'm going to tell you something. I'm a true believer that Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965 because he decided to make the case against the United States in front of the United Nations. He was going to bring to the world what was going on in the biggest and most free democracy in the world. The United States should give African American reparations for slavery. There's been no real commitment. Now, I'm not saying reparations is the answer at this point. I'm not saying there's an argument for that, and if there was, it would be under the legal theory of unjust enrichment. Somehow, the country got rich off the backs of others. Shouldn't we repay them? Give you an example. Back in the 40s, when World War II started, we took Japanese on the West Coast and we put them in internment camps. That's kind of messed up. You know, they were citizens. They were people living here free. But because we're warring with individuals of their same race, we decided to encamp them. Well, you know, we had to let them go, but we paid them reparations. The country has not yet confronted its legacy of colonial history, enslavement, racial terrorism, inequality. We don't confront this on a day-to-day basis. We really don't. Some of us just assume it occurred and say, well, how about tomorrow? Tomorrow will be better. And then we get up tomorrow, and tomorrow looks like yesterday. We're facing a human rights crisis sometimes. And it's been largely fueled by impunity for police officers who's killed black men. Those killings and the trauma they create brings back the thought of lynching. And I'm going to tell you something. You can Google lynching. You can watch lynching pictures that go on. It used to be called the strange fruit hanging from trees. Strange fruit, it is. And you can see these pictures, and what I want you to see in these pictures is I want you to see the audience. I want you to look at the people who are watching this event go on. Look at their faces. What are they thinking? What are they doing? Why is this happening? And why don't we confront that in this country? Because it's not over. It still goes on. So what's next, right? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, this isn't a wake-up call. Not for me, not for you. You know why? Because excessive force has happened before, and it will happen again. It'll happen tomorrow. Let's go back to the 80s, and let's talk about two people, Radio Raheem and Rodney King. Radio Raheem. If you saw the movie, Spike Lee's movie, Do the Right Thing, you'll understand Radio Raheem was killed in one of the last scenes of the movie. What's interesting is it was New York City Police Department using an illegal chokehold at the time, the same one used on Eric Gardner 30 years later. So when you tell me everything's going to change, it's going to be better in the future, really? Spike Lee was trying to bring that out in the 80s. And here, recently, 2014, 13, it's happening again. And what is New York City Police? Oh, we got to review that policy. Oh yeah, we probably shouldn't be doing that. Rodney King. We all watched the video. It's probably out there now. You can watch the video because we're so video oriented today, and thank God for video. Believe it or not, this was one of the first ones. This was the first time. Look at these cops beat this man. He is not moving, and they are beating him constantly. Hell, they took turns. It's almost like a tag team match. And if you don't get disgusted by it, it doesn't matter the race. You got to understand, I'm disgusted by that. But there is a rule in the criminal justice system. If you run from police, you're going to get your ass whooped. Period. You run from them, something's going to happen to you. And we watched that go down, and then we said, hey, let's prosecute these cops, right? Because obviously the evidence is there. And the jury said, nah, that's all right. They didn't do anything wrong. They probably were all just a little upset. That's all. And we did nothing. And the riots began. Now, riots are funny because riots seem to happen when any people feel an injustice has occurred. And those riots are practically uncontrollable at the time, and we have seen it over and over and over again. So, a solution. First of all, everybody's involved. White, black, yellow, brown, it doesn't matter. Everybody's involved. We do not do this all alone. The system of our laws must be exercised, and we're not going to like it. It's like not breathing. I don't like it. But we got to do it. So how do we do it? Because here's the ultimate effect. First of all, I want to put cops out of business. You know how I put them out of business? I'm a dreamer. I'm saying this. All right, let's see. Let's pick a neighborhood where cops are always going out to, and they always got problems, right? I would ask that neighborhood for 1 month. Don't commit any crimes. Just don't do anything for a month. Just a month. That's all. And let's see how many cops have to respond, because now it becomes an economic problem. If we're not expending the money there, where should we put you? Are we going to send you up, to other neighborhoods? No, because they focus on those neighborhoods because they know individuals are there who can be arrested, who are probably on probation and parole. But if there's no call-outs, then why are you there? Now's the time to pull your camera out while nobody's committing crimes. But that's just me dreaming. Practical impact is save lives. So what I'm going to teach you is what I would teach anybody, Michael Brown, Gardner, anybody. Mario Woods, Laquan, it doesn't matter. You, tomorrow, a week from now. Because the prison industrial complex is real. The more and more we lock up, the more money somebody gets. So, your rights under the Constitution, this is why I'm here. First Amendment, you guys, what does it give you the right to do? Protest, assemble, right? Get out there and protest. Lawful speech. I can say what I want, when I want, under conditions. Exercise your religion. Voltaire said, to learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are allowed to criticize. Because there's some people you're not going to criticize and get away with it. But your right to free speech should be here for all of us. You can say what you want to say, but there are consequences. And in my game, I'm going to tell you right now, you shut the hell up. When police officers and you encounter, there's no right. You have a right to talk, but you shouldn't. There are times when you shouldn't. And the Fourth Amendment is going to teach us this, because the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution was the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures in our homes, our cars, our person, and our things. Probation or parole is a waiver of this right. If you're on probation parole, you no longer have this right, and the wording is, a police officer may search you day or night with or without a warrant. The key is reasonableness. Now, reasonableness can be defined upon who the individual is, because here's what's reasonable. I see a black guy. He's got dreads. Look at that car. That car is a badunk-a-dunk car. Look at that. I bet you know what? He's got a gun in it. If not a gun, he's got dope in it. He's probably doing something wrong. He's on probation or parole. Is it reasonable for me to think that way? It can be if I'm an officer who's in charge with enforcing the law, and I feel that, hey, that's a reasonable conclusion for me to draw. And if it is, I'll pull him over, because now the Fourth Amendment said he's only required to be free from unreasonable searches, but I just did the reasoning, and I find I'm going to pull him over, so I do. Now, what happens there is the problem. And what we see is this driving while black thing. That's how that came up, where you didn't need any more than that. So the Fifth Amendment then kicks in. What does that give us the right to do? Remain silent, not incriminate yourself. An attorney. Understand, this right is probably the most important right that you have, and it's the right to shut the hell up. Adults versus children. Guess what? If you're a child, if you're a minor, do not ask for your mama. Your mama will not come. You ask for a lawyer. You can see over and over again, and I got to skip false confessions. I got to go to the 6. But you will see over and over again children being manipulated by officers because it's great policy to lie to people. And you can lie to children. It's okay. In fact, you know what? It's an honored police practice. So, the Sixth Amendment, you got a right to a lawyer. Gideon told us that. Case of Gideon was an individual who was charged in the 60s, and we said after Gideon, if you're charged with felony or misdemeanor, you're going to have a lawyer. The problem is, it may be a public defender and someone you don't know, but you do have a right to a lawyer. So here is the exercise. Here it is, the power of consent. Do you understand that every encounter with police officers would be consensual unless you determine what are the parameters of that encounter? So, here's the way this works. If an officer comes up to you, the one question you ask, I don't care what the situation is am I free to leave? So they walk up to you, hey you, stop, or pull you over in the car. Hey you, give me your ID. Here's my ID, but am I free to leave? Now you may think, well, that's ridiculous, because of course the cop just pulled you over, Keith. What the hell are you talking about? But you have to ask this question because it defines the parameters of the conversation. It's no longer a consensual encounter depending on what the officer says. Because if the officer in a traffic stop, in a public place, you're in the mall, at your house, over the phone, anytime, if the answer is no, you're not free to leave, you are now detained under the Constitution. You may not be cuffed, you may be sitting in your car, but it's now a detention under the law. And the only question is, or the answer is I want a lawyer. If the answer is no, I want a lawyer. You know why? Because those are magic words. Don't believe First 48. Don't believe these television shows and these movies. When you say I want a lawyer, the officer must stop interrogating. Stop what they're doing. And here's how it works on a traffic stop. Cop pulls you over. I'm not saying anything. You know why? Because I don't have to right then. Now that First Amendment's kicking in, I think I'm gonna shut the hell up though. Because most of the time the problem is this. What you pull me over for? Why you messing with me? Is it because I'm black? What you think I did? I didn't do nothing. Why you fucking at me? Isn't that the way it always starts, right? All the guys. That's how it started. That's why the rule is shut the hell up. If there's something going on, they're going to tell you. So you wait. The officer says something to you. The first thing, am I free to go? And the officer, hell no, I got you at gunpoint. What are you talking about? Then I want my lawyer. Now, you know what the officers have to do? They got to huddle up. All right, huddle up. Did he do anything wrong? I don't know. Did he? I don't know. He exercised his rights. I don't know. Can we search? I don't know. We don't have probable cause. He didn't say anything. He didn't argue with us. I can't shoot him. They got to huddle up. They got to figure out, well, what went on? Because that's where you leave that conversation. The only thing you have to do is name, rank, serial number. That's it. Give them your ID. But you shut the hell up. Because whatever is going to happen is going to happen. If they've got probable cause to arrest you, they're going to do it, whether you said something or not. The only reason they want you to talk is to admit to a crime. That's it. Come on, tell me what you did. And it could be like this. Well, I just want to know if you were at Safeway at about 2 o'clock this afternoon. Right? Sounds like it. Oh, well, yes, I was at Safeway at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Oh, that's great, because somebody robbed Safeway and they look just like you. Now, you didn't know that, right? So your ignorance has now talked your way into a damn robbery charge. Your ignorance, because you didn't exercise your rights. You're not offending the cop. In fact, the cop would be like, God damn, you're smart. Whoa, who taught you your rights? Because most of the time, stupid people be just telling me anything. I didn't do it. Billy did it, though. Shut the hell up. Think about every situation where guys have been shot. How did it start? Why are you messing with me for selling cigarettes? I didn't rob no store. What you bothering me for? It's always a conversation when it shouldn't be. All you should say is, I want my lawyer. And you know what? If they don't listen to you, you say it again. I want my lawyer. Say it in a different tone. I want my lawyer. You know what I want? I want my lawyer. Play with them. Because here's the point. You don't fight your battle, your legal battle, on the street corner. You don't fight it in the interrogation room. You fight it when you get your lawyer, and your lawyer looks at everything and says, they had no cause to stop you. So that cocaine in your pocket, the illegal gun, the body in your trunk, they gotta suppress it. Can't use it against you. Now people always say, well, damn it, Keith, why are you telling people how to commit crimes and get away with it? I'm not telling you anything. I am teaching you your rights under the Constitution, that it belongs to everybody. So you either be safe, live, or you fool around and maybe you die. So you'd make that choice. Because a right will lie dormant until you exercise it. If you don't exercise it, nobody cares. You think the cops care? If you don't, the first thing you say is, hey man, what's going on? What do you think the cop's gonna say? Oh, well, you know what? I just thought you were a black guy driving along. I didn't mean to pull you over. I know it's illegal, but I'm just gonna pull you over anyway. You think you're gonna hear that? Or, you know what? You just look like a druggie. You just look like this. You look like you did something. I'm just gonna wonder and speculate that you did something, and that's why I pulled you over. Do you realize under the law that's illegal? And that's why you have to hold them to task. All right. I'm actually gonna skip through some things. But I'm gonna tell you something. when there's police action, I'm gonna go through this one slide. This is why you file complaints when cops do things wrong. There is, for the Sac Police Department, Office of Police Accountability, Francine Flournoy runs that office. Now guess what? Guess how many people work for her? None. It's her, by herself. And she oversees when cops do stuff bad. I know, almost got me. There are no processes for other agencies, Sac Sheriff, Citrus Heights, Folsom, whatever. Nobody else has any redress. You just have to get a complaint form off the internet and file it and follow up. Now the follow up is key. You have to follow up. A lot of people file it because they're angry at the moment and they do nothing, but you gotta keep following up. One of the things why this is important is because of things called pitches motions. You see, if I think I got a badass cop did some stuff bad. He's a racist, he's a sexist, whatever he did, he excessive force. I can make a motion under pitches, which is the name of the case, to get his employment file, to find out, guess what? How many people have complained against his ass? That's what's there. So if you have filed that complaint and followed up, it should be in his employment file, whether they did something against him or not. I want that. You know why? Because as I'm going to trial with my client, I'm going to call you to tell me your experience and use it against the cop. Another way of using it is employment actions. You know, the public can actually chime in when cops are trying to be sergeants and lieutenants and things like that, and maybe we don't want them to be. And so it's important to have these complaints out there so that somebody can be a voice before they get promoted into a position of bigger power. And there's an independent record. Now, I am promoting people like the NAACP, Urban League, to take a copy of these complaints and keep them, and here's why. See, I'm slick this way. A court may not allow me under pitches to get to their employment file, but if NAACP or Urban League or some other community organization has a copy of that, I don't need to go to court to get it. And I got 10 complaints against this cop, and you couldn't keep me from getting them. This is why you complain against the cops. It's not for your case, it's for the future. Because if there is a bad apple, we need to get rid of the bad apple. We don't throw bad apples back into the basket. All right, power of the vote. Let's just say, damn it, do it. If you don't vote, I'm really upset with you. I'm gonna give you a point. Kanye, right? He didn't vote. Kaepernick didn't vote. And I'm going to myself, you've got a platform where people are listening to you and you didn't exercise the right to vote? Do you know how many of my people died? How many women had to die and suffer to get that right to vote? And you don't do it? I'm disgusted. Now, I understand we are living in a nation of what? Choice, right? You can choose not to, but how really smart is it for you not to make that choice? It's a symbol, if anything, of you're respecting the individuals who have come before. Because that hasn't always been a given. And when we're looking at voting rights laws throughout this country, you better watch out, because things may turn. So, Martin Luther King, what did he say? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Malcolm X, my hero, what did he say? The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So what you're doing is just preparing for your future right now. And then there was another great man. What did he say? And who is this guy? Because I believe that if you change yourselves, we can change this world. It's all about us and our behavior. It isn't about judging across the aisle. It's about what are you going to do? Because I say the real test of a righteous person is one who can remain righteous even when those around them are not. And that's who I want to be. Oh, you can do things to me, I don't care. But I will remain righteous. I will exercise my rights. I will do what I have to do. I will defend my clients to the end in order to preserve the system that I view as should be the right system that we live in. We're all together in this boat. And if we got a few holes, guess what? It's not just me that goes down, it's you too. So keep the holes out of the boat. We're all walking in the same direction. And as soon as we start moving in different paths, which is what certain things want you to do, then we get off the major path. And that would be a crime. Thank you, guys.
Please be formulating your questions for Mr. Staten. In the meantime, we'll have very brief remarks, first by Lotus Fong.
Hello. First, I want to thank you, Keith, for an excellent talk. I think that was very informative, and I hope everyone got a lot out of it. There's a couple of things that that really struck me during Keith's talk, and something that he emphasized at the end about how it is together that we make a change, and when you know your rights, that is when you can make a change. I think that in the society, a lot of times we emphasize separateness. We look to supporting, one person's right, as Keith mentioned in the beginning, how we have the Asian hyphen, American, Black, African hyphen, American, Hispanic hyphen, American. And I think all of these things are important to take pride in our history. But also, sometimes when we focus on the separateness, we take ourselves away from each other and we focus only on our own issues. And we forget that really it is all of us that are together in one giant boat. All of us are people. All of us have the same rights. And it's only when we realize that we are all same and together that we will actually act to further those rights. So I want to emphasize that, one, it is important to know your rights. But it's not just important to know your rights, it's important to educate the people around you about your rights. And it is important, as Keith said, to exercise your rights. If you have a right, but you don't use it, you're neither an example for the people around you, but also those rights that have been fought for, that are so important, lay dormant. And what's the point in having a right if you don't even exercise it? I also wanted to speak quickly about the police. I think especially during the mass shootings that have occurred, many shootings that have occurred, I think a lot of people have a tendency to think of the police as kind of this force that is outside ourselves, something that we cannot control. But I think it's important to realize that the police are human, the police have their own biases, the police have their own stereotypes. But the police also serve an important function, that is to help protect the society that we have today. And I think, as I was going back to what I was saying about separateness, I think it's important that we not think of the police as separate, but as one of us that have perhaps more rights over us as civilians, but also people that are one with us, that are similar and think the same way that we do and honestly want the same things that we do, which is a peaceful and hopefully integrated society. So I think rather than just seeing the police as separate, realize that they are one of everybody, but that we do need to know what our rights are in order to deal with the encounters with them. And I think, and the last thing that I want to bring up is labels. And I think that it's important to look behind the labels. I think Keith brought up an excellent point about how before groups like the Black Panthers were thought of as terrorist groups, but they were in fact the groups that were helping to feed children. And I think it's important to be critical about the labels that we put on people, whether that is terrorist, whether that is criminal, whether that is murder, what is this? I think it's important to look behind the label as to what that person actually is. Is that person, if once we label somebody criminal, we have a lot of stereotypes that go with that. But is that the true label? Is that the truth behind what happens? And I think when we really think critically about those labels, we can see behind them and see whether we're actually treating those people correctly and whether that is whether the rights that we ascribe to them are the correct rights. So in conclusion, I just want us to be aware of noticing when we separate ourselves and hopefully break down those areas of separation, and then also to look behind the labels so that we don't create an unjust society. Thank you so much.
And Chris Serpina. Yep.
Thank you, Keith. I've got more of a question than commentary, because I think, what you're able to add to this discussion as a criminal defense attorney is a very different perspective than, say, I can add, or the criminologist or the economist that were talking at the conference yesterday. And so one of the things that we're concerned about are things like mass incarceration and issues like policing for profit, and you talked a great deal about how there are financial incentives on really all sides that have put us into the position that we're in right now. And obviously there's no easy solution, but from what you've seen, what do you think would be perhaps not the easiest, or painless, or the most politically possible, let's go with that, the most politically possible step we can take to make progress on some of these issues that you've identified?
All right, beautiful. Here's the thing. I didn't grow up following the law, let's just say. It took some individuals and people in my life to turn me around. So I do believe we have to invest far more in our primary education. We have to invest in our children before they reach me. By the time you reach me, you've got a real freaking problem, And I hate that, because I can't turn back time. There's an old saying in law, you can't unring the bell. So I can't go back into your history and find out what led you down the path to where you're meeting me, and not some other college professor or something like that. I have to be the one to educate you, and not some other person like your family or your school or anything like that. So the more money that we take away from our criminal justice system and incarceration and put it into the education of our youth to make sure that they all have the tools necessary. Classrooms are small. Teachers care. I was going to say give a shit, but teachers really, really care, because I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of teachers who want to do the right thing, but they don't have the tools to do so. So we've got to turn our focus to the youth before they get to me. Because when they get to me, all I can do is teach you from there. Oh, and I do. Oh, you believe this is preaching? Don't be one of my clients, because we will talk for hours on how you got here. And why are you here? And what are you going to do from here? If you're doing life in prison, you know what I think? I think you're still a bright, shining star. You know why? Because you're going to get there and you're going to hear from me, and you're going to spout the things that I say, and we're going to turn this prison system around. We're going to change it from the place that is the most violent and our worst, lowest area. And I truly believe that that can happen. Think about this. My idea is book clubs, where we send individuals into prison, and we have book clubs. Why? Because the Bible can come in. We can talk about the Bible, can't we? We can talk about religion, right? Why can't we have book clubs in prison where young black men are filling a room like this and we're talking about history? Where are you from? How do you get here? Why can't we do such things? Even for those who we consider are lost, you see? So the important thing is now turning on the children. I want 6th graders. I want 7th graders here before they fall into our system. Let's teach them. Let's educate them. Let's provide them, though, most importantly, with tools. Everything they need. Because I'm going to tell you, here's what I tell kids. They come and they go like, I ain't got no daddy, I ain't got no mama, my mama's a crackhead, whatever, right? I always say this. You ain't got no mama and daddy? Go find one. Plenty of them are out here. Approach an adult and say, you know what? I think you're doing something with your life. I just want to follow you around. I just want to know something about you. Believe it or not, I bet you 9 times out of 10, that adult is going to reach out to that child. And that's where our focus has to be. It's this thing, each one teach one. Look for the children out there that you can affect personally. And then on a bigger scale, as we take money from this criminal justice system and this prison system, we need to pour it into our kids. There is nothing more important than that. And we sit here and we talk about it, but we got to do. Because we haven't been doing. And there's been forces out there who say, capitalism is the key, Keith. I need to make my money. And I understand. But do we want to repair, or do we want to continue down a road of brokenness?
We have about 10 minutes for your questions. Show me where they are.
So, So under the Fourth Amendment, you have you're not allowed to get searched, right? But when you're on parole or probation, you lose that right. But once you're released off parole or probation, you get that amendment back, right? You get to exercise your right. You can tell them no. How is it that sometimes cops still ask the question, are you on parole or probation? And then even though when you answer no, the conversation is not going well if they already ran your record. How do you go about diffusing a situation like that?
Perfect. Okay. First of all, the Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. And you're right. So there, in that situation, that's why you've got to determine the parameters of the conversation. Am I free to leave? You've got to determine that up front. Now, if you are on probation or parole, and I'm going to tell you something, cops aren't stupid. They know they can go in a group of black kids and say, who's on probation, parole? And the problem is you have to answer whether you are or are you not. And when you say you are, they can search you because you have given up that right, but only for that period of time of parole or probation. Your right is reinstated. And that is why, if I'm not on probation, parole, you ask me, I'm not. The cop says, well, let me search you or turn around. You say, am I free to leave? You have to establish that right then and there. And when they say no, I'm going to search you anyway, I want my lawyer. Now, what I'm saying is, dig this, and here's why I'm not pro-crime, against crime, all that kind of thing. I don't give a shit what you got in your pocket. I don't care what you've been doing. You see what I'm saying? All I'm saying is you have certain rights and you've got to exercise them because the cops then got to hull up. Or when it comes to me as a case, I'm going to look at everything that happened. And I'm going to see that you weren't on probation parole, but yet he stopped you and searched you. You got to have probable cause to search. That's more than reasonable suspicion. You got to have probable cause, which means I strongly suspect that you've committed a crime. Not I think you have, I strongly suspect you have. And then you better lay out your reasons. Because then I'm making a motion in court and anything they found, I can suppress. You leave it up to your lawyer. Never fight your battle in the street corner, on the street, or in an interrogation room. And guess what? You shouldn't even be in an interrogation room when you say, I want my lawyer. Oh, you'll sit there. They'll give you cookies and cakes. They'll, tell you, oh yeah, you can use the bathroom. They'll treat you real nice and all that kind of shit. But in essence, what they're trying to do is soften you to try to say something because you want to go home. Okay, there's got to be more.
Another question.
Shoot. Unless you all believe what I say, and you will walk out of here different citizens, which I am going to applaud that. Fight for power.
So I just had a question. You said your dream was that, like, in a community, people wouldn't commit crime for a month.
Yes.
But isn't it more accurate to say that, especially in poor communities, a lot of people are victims of crime and they can't leave the community? So isn't that
true? Oh no, I recognize that, and what I'm saying, that's why it's a dream.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I have another dream too. That dream is I'll wake up tomorrow morning and guess what? There'll be all these reporters at schools, right? They'll be reporting CNN, MSB, NBC, all of them. And you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, ladies and gentlemen, it's unbelievable. Do you realize that every black child has attended school today? Everyone has showed up. Every elementary school, every middle school, every high school, the kids are here. And this is a story. Now, on the one hand, I'm like, yay. But then on the other hand, I'm crying. Because I'm going, wow, really? So when I say my dream, what I am saying is, when you don't commit the crimes, then we don't have the victim. So, yes, there are victims in those communities, but my dream is, just stop for a moment. What if things just halted for a moment and the cops never had to go to Oak Park for a month? Never had to go to Meadowview for a month? Why are they there? Pull out your camera now and watch them roll the streets without any calls. Watch them just, harass individuals on the corner for no reason? That's when I need your cameras out. Because what I'm saying is the economic impact of putting officers on the street changes then. We now see how important money is and how cops have to arrest individuals to feed this huge system. All right.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
But given that people are victims, doesn't that also make a police presence necessary?
Yes. And which is why I said, look, we need police, because if somebody's beating my ass, I'm gonna call out the cops.
Okay.
Okay? But my dream is nobody's gonna be beating my ass. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So therefore, there'd be no need for even me to call the cops. And that would be the situation I just want to see. What will happen? It'd be an interesting social experiment, wouldn't it? Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Your talk was really good, and I am definitely going to remember. Am I free to go? And if not,
I want my lawyer.
I want my lawyer. In a more like proactive, after that fact, in terms of engaging with the system, what really struck me in your presentation was the slide with the skin tone and the years that they had written on their arms. And I don't know much about law. Is there a reason that when sentencing is taking place that the people who are doing the sentencing, I assume the judges, have access to information about people's either race or gender or any of that? Why is there not a separation, some sort of veil that they don't get that kind of information, so they can't get that kind of...
I'm going to try to answer that as swiftly as I can. First of all, what we have sometimes are laws that require mandatory sentences. And an example of that is a gang enhancement or a gun enhancement. Do you realize if you went outside right now and committed a robbery with a gun, that it is a 12-year minimum prison sentence for anybody? Now, the problem becomes who and how are being in that system. What I'm seeing a lot of black males get caught into that. And so you're doing a 12-year sentence. I'm seeing the DAs who could actually change the gun 10-year enhanced, because you get 2 for robbery, 10 for the gun. And the 10 is mandatory, and it's mandatory prison. Now, this is just one law. But I'm seeing that that's being applied a lot to young African Americans who are robbing each other for tennis shoes, cell phones. Now, I'm not for that. You got to understand, part of that stop doing crime thing is that we have to change. That's what I mean by changing our behavior, is don't give them the incentive to do that, because a judge sitting there will look at that and say, you know what, you're getting 12. 12 to 15 is really what you get. So you know what happens is I got to go to trial. Because why would I take 12 years as a deal when the max I can get is 15? And so what we see, though, with the skin color thing is that if you tend to have more money, more influence, you're going to get a lesser treatment. One of the biggest thing, I'll just put this out here. What was it? It was the senator's son who was involved in a stabbing right before Arnold got out of office, right? And they punished the other boys. But him, think about it. Arnold went back and said, you know what? I'm going to commute your sentence. Why? Why? Because Daddy was a friend of Arnold's. Period. There's no other justification. He should have suffered just like everyone else. And that's the kind of example that we don't want to set. It's the kind of thing we don't want to have happen, but it happens all the time. Those with money, those with power will be treated differently in our criminal justice system. Period. And people don't trust their lawyers. It's hard to trust a lawyer who's given to you, and you don't know that lawyer, and the first thing the lawyer says is, well, look, it's a robbery with a gun. You're looking at 12 years. Go on in here and take 12 years. And you've never done a crime before in your life. That's a hard pill to swallow. But it's our criminal justice system. So now what happens is, not only is that person's life changed, but their family's life is changed. What if they had a 2-3-year-old son? Now that kid's going to grow up without the father. What's going to happen to the mother of that kid? What's going to happen to the grandparents? What's going to be the burden on that family from that one individual incarcerated? So I also plead to that young boy, don't do the crime. Because look at what you're looking at. Because a lot of young kids don't understand playing stick-up kid with each other, who, believe it or not, this is the craziest shit in the world. is that people rob people they know. You live next door to the guy, and you rob him. And then next week, he robs you. So it's a freaking game. But the minute you're caught, somebody's looking at 12. And so I'm also trying to change that vernacular, that feeling of why. What are you getting, a cell phone? So it's a two-pronged thing. Our system is harsh. The 3 strikes law is another harsh law. We can talk about 1020 life. We can talk about all these laws we passed as Californians, but they're being primarily forced upon individuals in the black community, Hispanic community, and things like that. Because why? They're the ones that the cop's gonna catch.
We have time for exactly one more question.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for your talk. It was very informative. I do have a question about a specific instance that I've actually experienced. So, if a cop pulled me over for a traffic violation, and then claims that they have probable cause to search the car, and they ask me to get out of the car, and I asked, "Am I free to go?" The cop didn't even acknowledge that I asked the question, and I, word for word, literally said, "Sit down, little girl," on the sidewalk. And just completely dismissed the fact that I was asking if I was free to leave. So in that instance, when the cop doesn't even acknowledge that you are trying to exercise your right, what are you supposed to do?
You are supposed to shut the hell up, look more than talk, watch things, and the next the next statement out of your mouth is, "I'm not saying shit till I get my lawyer." That's it.
Well, see, I didn't say anything is the
Good.
thing, right?
And what happened?
He just sat there and searched the car and didn't find anything, but it wasted like 2 hours of my time for no
Now,
reason.
you go back and you complain about that behavior. You see?
You complained
Yes,
about it.
that's where you've got to complain about that behavior. Now, let's just say you had a little cocaine in the car. See? No, I mean, I'm not saying, but let's just say it doesn't have to be her cocaine. There's cocaine in the car. Now, they're going to arrest you, right? And you know what the cop's going to say? "Hey, little lady, how come I found this cocaine in the car?" Now, if you didn't know your rights, you start, "What cocaine? Where was it? That ain't my cocaine." "Well, how come it's in your jacket?" Now you see how the conversation has gotten out of hand already? That's where you have to be strong and say, cocaine, in your mind, you're thinking, "What the fuck cocaine doing in my car?" But what comes out is, "I want my lawyer." Now, you come to me as a lawyer, the first thing I see is, why did they pull you over? Okay, a traffic violation. And then they have to have probable cause to search. They didn't smell anything. They didn't see anything. Did you see anything that shows criminality? You see what I'm saying? So I will file a motion under 1538.5 of the Penal Code, which says suppress this because it was an unreasonable search, because they had no reason to search her. Now that cocaine goes away. So are they trying to prosecute you? No, they can't, because there's no cocaine to prosecute you with.
Quickly, so if they are to search me and I'm just to keep quiet, am I to consent to that search regardless? So
No.
what do? Do you just
No.
sit in the car and say,
That's
"No,
right.
I'm not getting out"?
You watch more than talk. You listen more than talk. You never consent to a search. Even if you're on probation parole, you can tell them, "I don't consent to a search." Now they'll tell you, "Hey, you're on probation parole and you know that." But I'm gonna tell you something. There are case law that says they gotta have some reason. They can't willy-nilly do it. You see what I'm saying? So I still got some action to say, "Judge, this was completely willy-nilly. There was never a reason behind why they searched this person, except for the fact that they're on probation parole. There was no calls, nothing from their probation officer saying they're in violation. They did nothing wrong. Hell, it wasn't even a traffic stop when we think about it. You see what I'm saying? And hell, maybe the traffic stop was screwed up. I'll give you an example. 22-107 of the Vehicle Code talks about staying in your lane, and you have to signal before you turn, right? Understand, when you read that Vehicle Code section, though, you have to affect other traffic. So you never have to signal unless other cars are in the way that will be affected by your movement. I'm just saying. So even if you were pulled over for that, I could fight that Vehicle Code. All right, Don't get me started. We'll talk law all day.
We're going to recommence for our final session at 2 p.m., so that's just 5 short minutes. But we should all thank Mr. Staten.